Welcome. Tonight, we travel back to a time before paved roads and electric lights, before cities stretched across the continent, to a time when the world, for many, seemed endless, when every mile westward was a step into the unknown. This is the story of the American frontier, not the one of heroic legends or fast-paced gunfights, but the quieter, truer version. A place of exhaustion, perseverance, and quiet courage. A place where wind whispered endlessly through the prairie grass, and a single flickering lantern could feel like the only light in the world. In this episode, we'll explore what it was really like to live on that frontier, to wake each morning to the creak of wooden wagons and the rustle of dry canvas, to carry water from a distant stream, or to build a home out of earth and hope, and to face, every day, the vastness of a land that could nurture or destroy. We'll move slowly through 4 chapters tonight. First, we'll immerse ourselves in the daily life of an ordinary pioneer, imagining the rhythm of their days and the quiet hardships they faced. Then, we'll turn to a story of a figure whose life and legend shaped the frontier, the outlaw Jesse James, a man both feared and admired. After that, we'll explore a mystery that has fascinated historians for generations. The tale of the lost Dutchman's gold mine, a story where hope and obsession blur. And finally, we'll end our journey in a small frontier town, where the rough and the refined met under the same dim lamplight. So settle in. Allow your breathing to slow. Imagine the sound of wind brushing through dry grass, and let the world of the past unfold, calm, quiet, and far away. Imagine now that the endless plains of the frontier have given way to rolling hills, gentle slopes of green and gold, with oak trees scattered like islands of shade. The year is around 1865, and the American Civil War has just ended. The land is quiet but uneasy. The scars of battle still run deep, not only in the ground, but in the hearts of those who survived it. Out here, in Missouri, the lines between soldier and outlaw are beginning to blur. Among the farms and winding dirt roads, a young man named Jesse Woodson. James is about to become one of the most famous and misunderstood figures of the frontier age. He was born on a farm, not far from the small town of Kearney. His childhood was unremarkable in many ways. Chores, church on Sundays, long days under the hot sun, tending crops with his family. But history has a way of turning ordinary boys into symbols of larger stories, and Jesse's life was shaped by the turbulence of his time. When the Civil War began, Missouri became a land divided, torn between Union and Confederate loyalties. Neighbors distrusted neighbors. Brothers found themselves on opposite sides. The war here was not fought on distant battlefields. It crept across pastures and through towns, quiet one moment and violent the next. Jesse's older brother, Frank James, joined a group of Confederate guerrillas, irregular fighters who waged war in secret raids rather than open battle. By the time Jesse was old enough to follow, the conflict had already grown bitter and personal. As the war ended, many of these guerrillas were unwilling, or perhaps unable, to return to ordinary life. The violence had reshaped them. The skills they had learned, ambush, escape, disguise, became the tools of a new kind of survival. The peace that followed the war was uncertain. For many in Missouri, it didn't feel like peace at all. And so, in this uneasy calm, Jesse James and his brother began to take part in robberies. First small ones, then larger, bolder acts. Trains, banks, stagecoaches, all became targets. To those in power, they were outlaws, plain and simple. To others, especially the poorer farmers and Southerners, who still felt wronged by the war's outcome, they were seen as avengers, rebels standing against the institutions that had crushed their way of life. In truth, Jesse James was both, and neither. He was a man of contradictions, polite to some, ruthless to others. He could quote scripture in one breath and plan a robbery in the next. The newspapers of the time played their part in shaping his legend. Stories of his exploits spread rapidly, often exaggerated, sometimes entirely invented. In a country still struggling to rebuild its sense of identity, Jesse James became a symbol of rebellion, of freedom, of a wildness that refused to be tamed. But beneath the headlines, life on the run was far from glamorous. The long nights hiding in barns, the endless moving from one safe house to another, it wore on him. The fear of betrayal lingered constantly. He trusted few, and perhaps rightly so. Imagine Jesse riding at dusk, the world painted in tones of copper and shadow. His horse moves quietly along a dirt road, hooves muffled by the dry earth. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, his face half hidden, eyes scanning the distance. He doesn't speak. He knows that every rustle in the brush could mean danger. There were times when he longed for peace, for the simple life of his youth, for the scent of cut hay, for mornings that began with birds instead of gunfire. But the life he had chosen no longer allowed for that. The Janes gang grew in notoriety and in number. They rode across Missouri, Kentucky, and beyond. Banks were robbed in broad daylight. Rail cars were halted by gunfire, echoing across the valleys. The stories multiplied, and so did the pursuit. For years, Jesse managed to elude capture. He had supporters, people who fed him, sheltered him, and refused to betray him. But time, as it always does, wore down even the boldest spirits. By his mid-30s, Jesse was tired. He had taken a new name, Thomas Howard, and settled briefly into something resembling domestic life. In the spring of 1882, it ended quietly, almost absurdly, in a small rented home in St. Joseph, Missouri. He had just hung his coat and turned to dust a picture frame when Robert Ford, a man he thought was a friend, raised a pistol and fired. And so, the life of Jesse James ended not in a dramatic chase, but in stillness, a single sound, a breath, and then silence. The legend, however, lived on. For decades afterward, dime novels, newspapers, and films turned him into something larger than life, a figure of romantic rebellion, a man who stood against the growing reach of law and order. But the truth was quieter, more human. He was not a hero, nor a monster. He was a man shaped by his time, by war, by hardship, by the restless promise of the American frontier. The land that birthed him was a land in transition. One generation's wilderness was becoming another's farmland. The iron tracks of the railroads stretched further each year, cutting through the grasslands where once only the wind had traveled. And as the railway spread, so too did the human hunger for discovery and for wealth. It is here, in this shifting landscape between hope and greed, that we find our next story. The tale of a mine said to be filled with gold, hidden somewhere in the desert, luring men with whispers of fortune. A mystery that has endured for over a century, and that, even now, refuses to be solved. The American desert stretches before you, vast, sun-bleached, and endless. The air shimmers with heat, and the ground is cracked and dry, scattered with stones that glow faintly orange beneath the afternoon sun. There is a silence here that hums in your ears, broken only by the distant whisper of the wind weaving through the canyons. We are now in Arizona, in the rugged landscape known as the Superstition Mountains. Even the name carries a weight, a hint of something mysterious, something ancient. Long before prospectors arrived with their picks and dreams of gold, these mountains were sacred to the Apache people. They spoke of strange lights flickering at night, of spirits that guarded the land, and of deep caverns that no living person should enter. To the Apache, the superstitions were not a place to be conquered. They were a place to be respected. But the 19th century brought a different kind of visitor, the gold seeker, the wanderer, the desperate dreamer. Among them was a man whose name would become legend, Jacob Waltz, the Dutchman, who wasn't Dutch at all, but German. He had come to America like many others, chasing opportunity, working as a prospector and miner in the Arizona Territory. Waltz was known as a quiet man, polite, self-reliant, and skilled at finding what others could not. He lived a modest life, keeping mostly to himself. But one story, whispered again and again, would tie his name forever to one of the greatest mysteries of the American West, the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. According to legend, sometime in the 1860s or 1870s, Jacob Waltz discovered a hidden vein of gold deep within the Superstition Mountains. Some said he found it with the help of an Apache guide. Others claimed he stumbled upon the entrance by pure chance, perhaps while escaping a storm or following the tracks of a stray mule. Whatever the truth, the story goes that the mine was unlike anything seen before. The gold was said to be pure, heavy, and abundant, veins running thick through quartz rock, glittering even in torchlight. It was, in every sense, a treasure beyond imagining. And yet, Waltz never revealed its location. He mined small amounts of gold here and there, enough to live comfortably, but not so much as to draw attention. Neighbors grew curious. Where was he getting it from? When pressed, he would smile faintly and change the subject. As the years passed, the mystery deepened. And then, one summer in 1891, an outbreak of pneumonia swept through the Salt River Valley. Jacob Waltz fell ill. He was taken in by a woman named Julia Thomas, who cared for him in his final days. On his deathbed, delirious and weak, Waltz began to speak of the mine. He described landmarks, a pointed peak, a dry riverbed, a hidden canyon shaped like a horse's head. He warned that the mine was cursed, that many who sought it would never return. Then, one morning, he was gone. After his death, Julia and a few friends tried to follow the directions he had given. They searched the mountains for weeks, but found nothing. The gold remained hidden. Over the decades, hundreds of others would follow in their footsteps. Some claimed to find clues, old maps, strange rock formations, even traces of tunnels. But none could say for certain they had found the mine itself. The mountains, it seemed, kept their secret well, and they were not kind to those who came searching. There are stories whispered even now of treasure hunters who vanished without a trace, of camps found abandoned, with tools scattered and fires still burning, of skeletons discovered years later in narrow ravines, their journals filled with desperate scrawls about the gold that was just beyond the next ridge. Whether these tales are true or born from the human imagination hardly matters. The desert blurs the line between truth and myth. The heat, the isolation, the strange patterns of the rocks, all conspire to make you see what you want to see. Even today, hikers wander the Superstition Mountains with GPS devices and old maps, hoping to uncover the fabled treasure. Some do it for adventure, some for history, some for greed. But all, in some small way, are chasing the same dream that drew men westward for centuries, the hope that fortune lies just beyond the horizon. If you were to stand there now, at dusk, the sun sinking behind the jagged peaks, you might understand why the legend endures. The desert seems to glow from within. The air cools, and shadows stretch long and sharp. It feels like a place where the earth itself is keeping secrets. The story of the Lost Dutchman's mine isn't really about gold. It's about human longing, for discovery, for wealth, for something extraordinary hidden, just out of reach. It's about the price of obsession and the thin line between pursuit and madness. And as we leave the desert behind, the world changes once again. The dust gives way to water, the wind to waves. Now we turn our eyes to the open sea, to wooden ships creaking under the weight of cargo, and to a story that begins not with treasure buried in the mountains, but with fortunes made and lost upon the tides. Our next journey takes us to the far reaches of the Pacific, to the mysterious and often misunderstood world of the whaling ships and the men who sailed them. The sea stretches endlessly before you, a soft, rolling plain of blue that shimmers in the morning light. The waves move with the slow rhythm of breath, and the wooden hull beneath your feet creaks like an old heart still beating. It is the mid-19th century, and you are aboard a whaling ship, far from the nearest shore. The Pacific surrounds you on all sides, an infinite horizon of quiet danger and quiet beauty. There is no land in sight, only the smell of salt and tar, and the low murmur of men at work, voices carried by the wind, mingling with the cry of distant seabirds. For most of us today, the word whaling conjures images of harpoons and vast ocean hunts. But in its time, this was a trade of survival and necessity, a global enterprise that lit the world as lamps and greased its machinery. Whale oil was the lifeblood of industry, and the men who hunted it sailed farther than almost any others of their age. The work was brutal. And yet, much like the settlers on the frontier or the miners in the desert, these men lived by a rhythm that was steady, repetitive, and strangely hypnotic perfect. Perhaps for drifting into thought or even into dreams. Imagine yourself waking before dawn, the deck slick with dew and the faint glow of lanterns swinging in the dark. You climb the ladder to the main deck, the boards cold beneath your bare feet. The ship moves gently, rocking like a cradle, as you begin the long ritual of the day, scrubbing the deck, tightening ropes, patching sails. There is a smell that never leaves you, a mix of salt, smoke, and something deeper, the lingering scent of whale oil that soaks into every surface. It clings to the men's clothes, their hair, their skin. Even sleep cannot escape it. The food is simple: hardtack biscuits, salted meat, coffee if you are lucky. Sometimes the cook boils rice or beans, or offers a piece of dried fruit as a rare treat. Each meal is eaten quickly, in silence or low conversation, while the waves slap rhythmically against the hull. The men come from everywhere: New England, Portugal, the Azores, the Pacific Islands, even the ports of Japan. They speak different languages, sing different songs. But aboard the ship, hierarchy is absolute. The captain gives orders, the mates enforce them, and the crew obeys. Days blend into weeks, and weeks into months. Sometimes the ship drifts for days without sighting a single whale. Sometimes a lookout's cry, "There she blows," shatters the monotony, and chaos bursts to life as boats are lowered into the sea. But not every voyage finds success. Many return home with empty barrels and weary hearts. Others never return at all. And yet, even in failure, there is a strange peace to this existence. The quiet rhythm of days marked only by the wind, the waves, and the stars. When a whale is finally sighted, the world sharpens into focus. Men rush to their stations, muscles moving with practiced efficiency. The smaller boats hit the water, gliding swiftly across the waves toward the distant spout. Every man knows his role, every breath measured and calm. But we will not linger on the violence of the hunt itself. It is enough to understand its purpose. From each whale came oil for lamps, bone for corsets and umbrellas, ambergris for perfume. Nothing was wasted. Each part of the animal became part of the machinery of human progress. After the hunt, the ship transforms. The deck becomes a floating workshop, men working through the night, cutting and boiling, rendering and refining. The air fills with steam and smoke, the sound of bubbling cauldrons, the murmur of tired voices. When the work is done, the ocean washes clean what it can. And again, silence returns. To live at sea was to live in a world apart, cut off from time and from the land's familiar pulse. Letters, if they came at all, took months to arrive. News from home was rare. The crew aged together, changed together, and learned to speak in the quiet shorthand of shared hardship. At night, under the vast sky, some men would sit alone by the rail, staring into the dark water. They spoke softly of home, of families left behind, of faces they might never see again. Others found comfort in routine, mending nets, carving wood, or simply listening to the creak of the timbers. The stars were their companions. Sailors read them like maps, tracing their courses across the heavens. There is something soothing about this image. Men who slept and woke beneath the same sky, trusting it to guide them home. By the late 19th century, the whaling industry began to fade. New technologies, kerosene lamps, later electricity, made whale oil less essential. Ships grew fewer, and the great ports of Nantucket and New Bedford fell quiet. The ocean, too, seemed to sigh in relief. The whales that had once been hunted without mercy slowly returned to their ancient roots. The sea reclaimed its calm. Today, few traces of that world remain. In museums, you might see the harpoons, the logbooks, the portraits of men whose faces are now lost to history. And if you stand by the shore on a quiet evening, you might imagine the faint outline of a ship on the horizon, sails filled, lanterns glowing softly in the mist. It is a haunting, peaceful image, the last of the whalers fading into the twilight of time. From the lonely cabins of the frontier to the dusty paths of westward migration, from the endless deserts hiding their golden secrets, to the far-off seas where men lived and died beneath the stars. The story of the American frontier was not only one of expansion or conquest, it was a story of endurance, of human beings pushing against the limits of their world, seeking meaning in the vastness that surrounded them. It is easy to romanticize their courage, their adventure, but perhaps what lingers most is their silence, the quiet labor, the waiting, the endless horizon, the rhythm of their lives, echoing softly across time. And now, as you rest, you can let that rhythm carry you. The creak of wood, the rustle of grass, the whisper of wind through canyon or sail, all blending together into the gentle hum of history. A reminder that the world, no matter how harsh, has always had its quiet moments. You may drift now, if you wish, back to the calm of your own room, where no dust storms rise, no waves crash, and no gold lies waiting to be found. Only the stillness of the present and the soft comfort of rest. Good night.